First Kings chapter 1. Now King David was very old, and no matter how many blankets covered him, he could not keep warm. So his advisers told him,
"We will find a young virgin who will wait on you and be your nurse. She will lie in your arms and keep you warm."
So they searched throughout the country for a beautiful girl, and they found Abishag from Shunem and brought her to the king. The girl was very beautiful, and she waited on the king and took care of him, but the king had no sexual relations with her. About that time, David's son Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, decided to make himself king in place of his aged father. So he provided himself with chariots and horses, and recruited 50 men to run in front of him. Now his father, King David, had never disciplined him at any time, even by asking,
"What are you doing?"
Adonijah was a very handsome man, and had been born next after Absalom. Adonijah took Joab, son of Zeruiah, and Abiathar the priest into his confidence, and they agreed to help him become king. But among those who remained loyal to David and refused to support Adonijah were Zadok the priest, Benaiah son of Jehoiada, Nathan the prophet, Shimei, Rei, and David's personal bodyguard. Adonijah went to the stone of Zoheleth near the spring of En-Rogel, where he sacrificed sheep, oxen, and fattened calves. He invited all his brothers, the other sons of King David, and all the royal officials of Judah. But he did not invite Nathan the prophet, or Benaiah, or the king's bodyguard, or his brother Solomon. Then Nathan the prophet went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, and asked her,
"Did you realize that Haggith's son, Adonijah, has made himself king and that our Lord David doesn't even know about it? If you want to save your own life and the life of your son Solomon, follow my counsel. Go at once to King David and say to him, 'My lord, didn't you promise me that my son Solomon would be the next king and would sit upon your throne? Then why has Adonijah become king? And while you are still talking with him, I will come and confirm everything you have said.'"
So Bathsheba went into the king's bedroom. He was very old now, and Abishag was taking care of him. Bathsheba bowed low before him.
"What can I do for you?"
He asked her. She replied,
"My lord, you vowed to me by the Lord your God that my son Solomon would be the next king and would sit on your throne. But instead, Adonijah has become the new king, and you do not even know about it. He has sacrificed many oxen, fattened calves and sheep, and he has invited all your sons, and Abiathar the priest, and Joab the commander of the army. But he did not invite your servant Solomon. And now, my lord the king, all Israel is waiting for your decision as to who will become king after you. If you do not act, my son Solomon and I will be treated as criminals as soon as you are dead."
While she was still speaking with the king, Nathan the prophet arrived. The king's advisers told him,
"Nathan the prophet is here to see you."
Nathan went in and bowed low before the king. He asked,
"My lord, have you decided that Adonijah will be the next king and that he will sit on your throne? Today he has sacrificed many oxen, fattened calves and sheep, and he has invited your sons to attend the celebration. He also invited Joab, the commander of the army, and Abiathar the priest. They are feasting and drinking with him and shouting, 'Long live King Adonijah!' But I myself, your servant, was not invited, neither was Zadok the priest, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, nor Solomon. Has my lord really done this without letting any of his servants know who should be the next king?"
"Call Bathsheba,"
David said. So she came back in and stood before the king, and the king vowed,
"As surely as the Lord lives, who has rescued me from every danger, today I decree that your son Solomon will be the next king and will sit on my throne, just as I swore to you before the Lord, the God of Israel."
Then Bathsheba bowed low before him again and exclaimed,
"May my lord King David live forever!"
Then King David ordered,
"Call Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada."
When they came into the king's presence, the king said to them,
"Take Solomon and my officers down to Gihon Spring. Solomon is to ride on my personal mule. There Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet are to anoint him king over Israel. Then blow the trumpets and shout, 'Long live King Solomon!' When you bring him back here, he will sit on my throne. He will succeed me as king, for I have appointed him to be ruler over Israel and Judah."
Amen.
Benaiah son of Jehoiada replied,
May the Lord, the God of my lord the king, decree it to be so. And may the Lord be with Solomon as he has been with you, and may he make Solomon's reign even greater than yours.
So Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and the king's bodyguard took Solomon down to Gihon spring, and Solomon rode on King David's personal mule. There Zadok the priest took a flask of olive oil from the sacred tent and poured it on Solomon's head. Then the trumpets were blown, and all the people shouted,
Long live King Solomon!
And all the people returned with Solomon to Jerusalem, playing flutes and shouting for joy. The celebration was so joyous and noisy that the earth shook with the sound. Adonijah and his guests heard the celebrating and shouting just as they were finishing their banquet. When Joab heard the sound of trumpets, he asked,
What's going on? Why is the city in such an uproar?
And while he was still speaking, Jonathan, son of Abiathar the priest, arrived.
Come in,
Adonijah said to him,
for you are a good man. You must have good news.
Not at all.
Jonathan replied.
Our lord King David has just declared Solomon king. The king sent him down to Gihon spring with Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada, protected by the king's bodyguard. They had him ride on the king's own mule, and Zadok and Nathan have anointed him as the new king. They have just returned, and the whole city is celebrating and rejoicing. That's what all the noise is about. Moreover, Solomon is now sitting on the royal throne as king. All the royal officials went to King David and congratulated him, saying, May your God make Solomon's fame even greater than your own, and may Solomon's kingdom be even greater than yours. Then the king bowed his head in worship as he lay in his bed, and he spoke these words, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who today has chosen someone to sit on my throne, while I am still alive to see it.
Then all of Adonijah's guests jumped up in panic from the banquet table and quickly went their separate ways. Adonijah himself was afraid of Solomon, so he rushed to the sacred tent and caught hold of the horns of the altar. Word soon reached Solomon that Adonijah had seized the horns of the altar and that he was pleading,
Let Solomon swear today that he will not kill me.
Solomon replied,
If he proves himself to be loyal, he will not be harmed. But if he does not, he will die.
So King Solomon summoned Adonijah, and they brought him down from the altar. He came and bowed low before the king, and Solomon dismissed him, saying,
Go on home.
Chapter 2. As the time of King David's death approached, he gave this charge to his son Solomon.
I am going where everyone on earth must someday go. Take courage and be a man. Observe the requirements of the Lord your God and follow all his ways. Keep each of the laws, commands, regulations, and stipulations written in the law of Moses, so that you will be successful in all you do and wherever you go. If you do this, then the Lord will keep the promise he made to me. If your descendants live as they should and follow me faithfully with all their heart and soul, one of them will always sit on the throne of Israel. And there is something else. You know that Joab, son of Zeruiah, murdered my 2 army commanders, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. He pretended that it was an act of war, but it was done in a time of peace, staining his belt and sandals with the blood of war. Do with him what you think best, but don't let him die in peace. Be kind to the sons of Barzillai of Gilead. Make them permanent guests of the king, for they took care of me when I fled from your brother Absalom. And remember Shimei, son of Gera, the man from Bahurim in Benjamin. He cursed me with a terrible curse as I was fleeing to Mahanaim. when he came down to meet me at the Jordan River, I swore by the Lord that I would not kill him. But that oath does not make him innocent. You are a wise man, and you will know how to arrange a bloody death for him."
Then David died and was buried in the city of David. He had reigned over Israel for 40 years, 7 of them in Hebron and 33 in Jerusalem. Solomon succeeded him as king, replacing his father David, and he was firmly established on the throne. One day Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, came to see Bathsheba, Solomon's mother.
"Have you come to make trouble?"
She asked him.
No,
He said,
I come in peace. In fact, I have a favor to ask of you.
What is it?
She asked. He replied,
As you know, the kingdom was mine. Everyone expected me to be the next king. But the tables were turned, and everything went to my brother instead. For that is the way the Lord wanted it. So now I have just one favor to ask of you. Please don't turn me down.
What is it?
she asked. He replied,
Speak to King Solomon on my behalf, for I know he will do anything you request. Ask him to give me Abishag, the girl from Shunem, as my wife.
All right.
Bathsheba replied.
I will speak to the king for you.
So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak on Adonijah's behalf. The king rose from his throne to meet her, and he bowed down before her. When he sat down on his throne again, he ordered that a throne be brought for his mother, and she sat at his right hand.
I have one small request to make of you,
She said.
I hope you won't turn me down.
What is it, my mother?
He asked.
You know I won't refuse you.
Then let your brother Adonijah marry Abishag, the girl from Shunem.
She replied.
How can you possibly ask me to give Abishag to Adonijah?
Solomon demanded.
You might as well be asking me to give him the kingdom. You know that he is my older brother, and that he has Abiathar the priest and Joab son of Zeruiah on his side.
Then King Solomon swore solemnly by the Lord,
May God strike me dead if Adonijah has not sealed his fate with this request. The Lord has confirmed me and placed me on the throne of my father David. He has established my dynasty, as he promised. So as surely as the Lord lives, Adonijah will die this very day.
So King Solomon ordered Benaiah son of Jehoiada to execute him, and Adonijah was put to death. Then the king said to Abiathar the priest,
Go back to your home in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not kill you now, because you carry the ark of the sovereign Lord for my father, and you suffered right along with him through all his troubles.
So Solomon deposed Abiathar from his position as priest of the Lord, thereby fulfilling the decree the Lord had made at Shiloh concerning the descendants of Eli. Although he had not followed Absalom earlier, Joab had also joined Adonijah's revolt. When Joab heard about Adonijah's death, he ran to the sacred tent of the Lord and caught hold of the horns of the altar. When news of this reached King Solomon, he sent Benaiah son of Jehoiada to execute him. Benaiah went into the sacred tent of the Lord and said to Joab,
The king orders you to come out.
But Joab answered,
No, I will die here.
So Benaiah returned to the king and told him what Joab had said.
Do as he said.
The king replied,
Kill him there beside the altar and bury him. This will remove the guilt of his senseless murders from me and from my father's family, and the Lord will repay him for the murders of 2 men who were more righteous and better than he. For my father was no party to the deaths of Abner son of Ner, commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa son of Jether, commander of the army of Judah. May Joab and his descendants be forever guilty of these murders, and may the Lord grant peace to David and his descendants, and to his throne forever.
So Benaiah son of Jehoiada returned to the sacred tent and killed Joab, and Joab was buried at his home in the wilderness. Then the king appointed Benaiah to command the army in place of Joab, and he installed Zadok the priest to take the place of Abiathar. The king then sent for Shimei and told him,
Build a house here in Jerusalem and live there, but don't step outside the city to go anywhere else. On the day you cross the Kidron Valley, you will surely die. Your blood will be on your own head.
Shimei replied,
Your sentence is fair, I will do whatever my lord the king commands.
So Shimei lived in Jerusalem for a long time. But 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves escaped to King Achish of Gath. When Shimei learned where they were, he saddled his donkey and went to Gath to search for them. When he had found them, he took them back to Jerusalem. Solomon heard that Shimei had left Jerusalem and had gone to Gath and returned. So he sent for Shimei and demanded,
Didn't I make you swear by the Lord, and warn you not to go anywhere else, or you would surely die? And you replied, The sentence is fair. I will do as you say. Then why haven't you kept your oath to the Lord, and obeyed my command?
The king also said to Shimei,
You surely remember all the wicked things you did to my father, King David. May the Lord punish you for them. But may I receive the Lord's rich blessings, and may one of David's descendants always sit on this throne.
Then at the king's command, Benaiah son of Jehoiada took Shimei outside and killed him. So the kingdom was now firmly in Solomon's grip. Chapter 3. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh the king of Egypt and married one of his daughters. He brought her to live in the city of David until he could finish building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around the city. At that time the people of Israel sacrificed their offerings at local altars, for a temple honoring the name of the Lord had not yet been built. Solomon loved the Lord and followed all the instructions of his father David, except that Solomon too offered sacrifices and burned incense at the local altars. The most important of these altars was at Gibeon, so the king went there and sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings. That night the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, What do you want? Ask, and I will give it to you. Solomon replied,
You were wonderfully kind to my father David, because he was honest and true and faithful to you. And you have continued this great kindness to him today by giving him a son to succeed him. O Lord my God, now you have made me king instead of my father David. But I am like a little child who doesn't know his way around. And here I am among your own chosen people, a nation so great they are too numerous to count. Give me an understanding mind, so that I can govern your people well, and know the difference between right and wrong. For who by himself is able to govern this great nation of yours?
The Lord was pleased with Solomon's reply and was glad that he had asked for wisdom. So God replied, Because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people, and have not asked for a long life or riches for yourself or the death of your enemies, I will give you what you asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding mind, such as no one else has ever had or ever will have. And I will also give you what you did not ask for, riches and honor. No other king in all the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. And if you follow me and obey my commands as your father David did, I will give you a long life. Then Solomon woke up and realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, where he sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings. Then he invited all his officials to a great banquet. Sometime later, 2 prostitutes came to the king to have an argument settled.
Please, my lord,
One of them began,
this woman and I live in the same house. I gave birth to a baby while she was with me in the house. 3 days later, she also had a baby. We were alone. There were only 2 of us in the house. But her baby died during the night when she rolled over on it. Then she got up in the night and took my son from beside me while I was asleep. She laid her dead child in my arms and took mine to sleep beside her. And in the morning, when I tried to nurse my son, he was dead. But when I looked more closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't my son at all.
Then the other woman interrupted.
It certainly was your son, and the living child is mine.
No,
The first woman said,
the dead one is yours, and the living one is mine.
and so they argued back and forth before the king. Then the king said,
Let's get the facts straight. Both of you claim the living child is yours, and each says that the dead child belongs to the other. All right. Bring me a sword.
So a sword was brought to the king. Then he said,
Cut the living child in 2, and give half to each of these women."
Then the woman who really was the mother of the living child and who loved him very much cried out,
"Oh, no, my lord! Give her the child! Please, do not kill him!"
But the other woman said,
All right. He will be neither yours nor mine. Divide him between us.
Then the king said,
"Do not kill him, but give the baby to the woman who wants him to live, for she is his mother."
Word of the king's decision spread quickly throughout all Israel, and the people were awed as they realized the great wisdom God had given him to render decisions with justice. Chapter 4. So Solomon was king over all Israel, and these were his high officials. Azariah son of Zadok was the priest. Elihoreph and Ahijah the sons of Shisha were court secretaries. Jehoshaphat son of Ahilud was the royal historian. Benaiah son of Jehoiada was commander of the army. Zadok and Abiathar were the priests. Azariah son of Nathan presided over the district governors. Zabud son of Nathan, a priest, was a trusted advisor to the king. Ahishar was manager of palace affairs. Adoniram son of Abda was in charge of the labor force. Solomon also had 12 district governors who were over all Israel. They were responsible for providing food from the people for the king's household. Each of them arranged provisions for 1 month of the year. These are the names of the 12 governors: Ben-Hur in the hill country of Ephraim, Ben-Diker in Mekaz, Shaalbim, Beth-Shemesh, and Elon Beth-Hanan, Ben-Hezed in Aruboth, including Sokoth and all the land of Hepher, Ben-Abinadab in Naphoth Dor. He was married to Tephath, one of Solomon's daughters. Beana, son of Ahilud, in Taanach and Megiddo, all of Bethshan near Zarethan, below Jezreel, and all the territory from Bethshan to Abel-Meholah and over to Jokmeam. Ben-Geber in Ramoth-Gilead, including the towns of Jair, named for Jair son of Manasseh, in Gilead, and in the Argob region of Bashan, including 60 great fortified cities with gates barred with bronze. Ahinadab, son of Edo, in Mahanaim. Ahimaaz in Naphtali, he was married to Basemath, another of Solomon's daughters. Beana, son of Hushai, in Asher and in Aluth. Jehoshaphat, son of Paruah, in Issachar. Shimei, son of Elah, in Benjamin. Geber, son of Uri, in the land of Gilead, including the territories of King Sihon of the Amorites and King Og of Bashan. And there was one governor over the land of Judah. The people of Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They were very contented with plenty to eat and drink. King Solomon ruled all the kingdoms from the Euphrates River to the land of the Philistines as far south as the border of Egypt. The conquered peoples of those lands sent tribute money to Solomon and continued to serve him throughout his lifetime. The daily food requirements for Solomon's palace were 150 bushels of choice flour, 300 bushels of meal, 10 oxen from the fattening pens, 20 pasture-fed cattle, 100 sheep or goats, as well as deer, gazelles, roebucks, and choice fowl. Solomon's dominion extended over all the kingdoms west of the Euphrates River, from Tiphsah to Gaza, and there was peace throughout the entire land. Throughout the lifetime of Solomon, all of Judah and Israel lived in peace and safety. And from Dan to Beersheba, each family had its own home and garden. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for his chariot horses and 12,000 horses. The district governors faithfully provided food for King Solomon and his court, each during his assigned month. They also brought the necessary barley and straw for the royal horses in the stables. God gave Solomon great wisdom and understanding and knowledge too vast to be measured. In fact, his wisdom exceeded that of all the wise men of the East and the wise men of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone else, including Ethan the Ezrahite and Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mechol. His fame spread throughout all the surrounding nations. He composed some 3,000 proverbs and wrote 1,005 songs. He could speak with authority about all kinds of plants, from the great cedar of Lebanon to the tiny hyssop that grows from cracks in a wall. He could also speak about animals, birds, reptiles, and fish. And kings from every nation sent their ambassadors to listen to the wisdom of Solomon. Chapter 5. King Hiram of Tyre had always been a loyal friend of David, so when he learned that David's son Solomon was the new king of Israel, Hiram sent ambassadors to congratulate him. Then Solomon sent this message back to Hiram.
You know that my father, David, was not able to build a temple to honor the name of the Lord his God, because of the many wars he waged with surrounding nations. He could not build until the Lord gave him victory over all his enemies. But now the Lord my God has given me peace on every side, and I have no enemies, and all is well. So I am planning to build a temple to honor the name of the Lord my God, just as he instructed my father that I should do. For the Lord told him, Your son, whom I will place on your throne, will build the temple to honor my name. Now, please command that cedars from Lebanon be cut for me. Let my men work alongside yours, and I will pay your men whatever wages you ask. As you know, there is no one among us who can cut timbers like you Sidonians."
When Hiram received Solomon's message, he was very pleased and said,
Praise the Lord for giving David a wise son to be king of the great nation of Israel.
Then he sent this reply to Solomon.
I have received your message, and I will do as you have asked concerning the timber. I can supply you with both cedar and cypress. My servants will bring the logs from the Lebanon mountains to the Mediterranean Sea and build them into rafts. We will float them along the coast to whatever place you choose. Then we will break the rafts apart and deliver the timber to you. You can pay me with food for my household.
So Hiram produced for Solomon as much cedar and cypress timber as he desired. In return, Solomon sent him an annual payment of 100,000 bushels of wheat for his household and 110 gallons of olive oil. So the Lord gave great wisdom to Solomon, just as he had promised. And Hiram and Solomon made a formal alliance of peace. Then King Solomon enlisted 30,000 laborers from all Israel. He sent them to Lebanon in shifts, 10,000 every month, so that each man would be 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of this labor force. Solomon also enlisted 70,000 common laborers, 80,000 stonecutters in the hill country, and 3,600 foremen to supervise the work. At the king's command, the stonecutters quarried and shaped costly blocks of stone for the foundation of the temple. Men from the city of Gebal helped Solomon's and Hiram's builders prepare the timber and stone for the temple. Chapter 6. It was in mid-spring during the 4th year of Solomon's reign that he began the construction of the temple of the Lord. This was 480 years after the people of Israel were delivered from their slavery in the land of Egypt. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high. The foyer at the front of the temple was 30 feet wide, running across the entire width of the temple. It projected outward 15 feet from the front of the temple. Solomon also made narrow, recessed windows throughout the temple. A complex of rooms was built against the outer walls of the temple, all the way around the sides and rear of the building. The complex was 3 stories high, the bottom floor being 7.5 feet wide, the second floor 9 feet wide, and the top floor 10.5 feet wide. The rooms were connected to the walls of the temple by beams resting on ledges built out from the wall, so the beams were not inserted into the walls themselves. The stones used in the construction of the temple were pre-finished at the quarry, so the entire structure was built without the sound of a hammer, axe, or any other iron tool at the building site. The entrance to the bottom floor was on the south side of the temple. There were winding stairs going up to the second floor, and another flight of stairs between the second and third floors. After completing the temple structure, Solomon put in a ceiling made of beams and planks of cedar. As already stated, there was a complex of rooms on 3 sides of the building attached to the temple walls by cedar timbers. Each story of the complex was 7.5 feet high. Then the Lord gave this message to Solomon. Concerning this temple you are building, If you keep all my laws and regulations and obey all my commands, I will fulfill through you the promise I made to your father David. I will live among the people of Israel and never forsake my people." So Solomon finished building the temple. The entire inside from floor to ceiling was paneled with wood. He paneled the walls and ceilings with cedar, and he used cypress for the floors. He partitioned off an inner sanctuary, the most holy place, at the far end of the temple. It was 30 feet deep and was paneled with cedar from floor to ceiling. The main room of the temple outside the most holy place was 60 feet long. Cedar paneling completely covered the stone walls throughout the temple, and the paneling was decorated with carvings of gourds and open flowers. Solomon prepared the inner sanctuary in the rear of the temple, where the Ark of the Lord's covenant would be placed. This inner sanctuary was 30 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet high. Solomon overlaid its walls and ceiling with pure gold. He also overlaid the altar made of cedar. Then he overlaid the rest of the temple's interior with pure gold, and he made gold chains to protect the entrance to the most holy place. So he finished overlaying the entire temple with gold, including the altar that belonged to the most holy place. Within the inner sanctuary, Solomon placed 2 cherubim made of olive wood, each 15 feet tall. The wingspan of each of the cherubim was 15 feet, each wing being 7.5 feet long. The 2 cherubim were identical in shape and size. Each was 15 feet tall. Solomon placed them side by side in the inner sanctuary of the temple. Their outspread wings reached from wall to wall, while their inner wings touched at the center of the room. He overlaid the 2 cherubim with gold. All the walls of the inner sanctuary and the main room were decorated with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. The floor in both rooms was overlaid with gold. For the entrance to the inner sanctuary, Solomon made double doors of olive wood with 5-sided doorposts. These doors were decorated with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and the doors were overlaid with gold. Then he made 4-sided doorposts of olive wood for the entrance to the temple. There were 2 folding doors of cypress wood, and each door was hinged to fold back upon itself. These doors were decorated with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and the doors were overlaid with gold. The walls of the inner courtyard were built so that there was 1 layer of cedar beams after every 3 layers of hewn stone. The foundation of the Lord's temple was laid in mid-spring of the 4th year of Solomon's reign. The entire building was completed in every detail by mid-autumn of the 11th year of his reign. So it took 7 years to build the temple. Chapter 7. Solomon also built a palace for himself, and it took him 13 years to complete the construction. One of Solomon's buildings was called the Palace of the Forest of Lebanon. It was 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. The great cedar ceiling beams rested on 4 rows of cedar pillars. It had a cedar roof supported by 45 rafters that rested on 3 rows of pillars, 15 in each row. On each of the side walls there were 3 rows of windows facing each other. All the doorways were rectangular in frame. They were in sets of 3 facing each other. He also built the Hall of Pillars, which was 75 feet long and 45 feet wide. There was a porch at its front covered by a canopy that was supported by pillars. There was also the Hall of the Throne, also known as the Hall of Judgment, where Solomon sat to hear legal matters. It was paneled with cedar from floor to ceiling. Solomon's living quarters surrounded a courtyard behind this hall. They were built the same way. He also built similar living quarters for Pharaoh's daughter, one of his wives. All these buildings were built entirely from huge, costly blocks of stone, cut and trimmed to exact measure on all sides. Some of the huge foundation stones were 15 feet long and some were 12 feet long. The costly blocks of stone used in the walls were also cut to measure, and cedar beams were also used. The walls of the great courtyard were built so that there was 1 layer of cedar beams after every 3 layers of hewn stone, just like the walls of the inner courtyard of the Lord's temple with its entrance foyer. King Solomon then asked for a man named Huram to come from Tyre, for he was a craftsman skilled in bronze work. He was half Israelite, since his mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father had been a foundry worker from Tyre. So he came to work for King Solomon. Huram cast 2 bronze pillars, each 27 feet tall and 18 feet in circumference. For the tops of the pillars he made capitals of molded bronze, each 7½ feet tall. Each capital was decorated with 7 sets of lattice work and interwoven chains. He also made 2 rows of pomegranates that encircled the lattice work to decorate the capitals over the pillars. The capitals on the columns inside the foyer were shaped like lilies, and they were 6 feet tall. Each capital on the 2 pillars had 200 pomegranates in 2 rows around them, beside the rounded surface next to the latticework. Huram set the pillars at the entrance of the temple, one toward the south and one toward the north. He named the one on the south Jachin, and the one on the north Boaz. The capitals on the pillars were shaped like lilies, and so the work on the pillars was finished. Then Huram cast a large round tank, 15 feet across from rim to rim. It was called the Sea. It was 7½ feet deep and about 45 feet in circumference. The sea was encircled just below its rim by 2 rows of decorative gourds. There were about 6 gourds per foot all the way around, and they had been cast as part of the tank. The sea rested on a base of 12 bronze oxen, all facing outward. 3 faced north, 3 faced west, 3 faced south, and 3 faced east. The walls of the sea were about 3 inches thick, and its rim flared out like a cup and resembled a lily blossom. It could hold about 11,000 gallons of water. Huram also made 10 bronze water carts, each 6 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 4½ feet tall. They were constructed with side panels braced with crossbars. Both the panels and the crossbars were decorated with carved lions, oxen, and cherubim. Above and below the lions and oxen were wreath decorations. Each of these carts had 4 bronze wheels and bronze axles. At each corner of the carts were supporting posts for the bronze basins. These supports were decorated with carvings of wreaths on each side. The top of each cart had a circular frame for the basin. It projected 1½ feet above the cart's top like a round pedestal, and its opening was 2¼ feet across. It was decorated on the outside with carvings of wreaths. The panels of the carts were square, not round. Under the panels were 4 wheels that were connected to axles that had been cast as one unit with the cart. The wheels were 2¼ feet in diameter and were similar to chariot wheels. The axles, spokes, rims, and hubs were all cast from molten bronze. There were supports at each of the 4 corners of the carts, and these too were cast as one unit with the cart. Around the top of each cart there was a rim 9 inches wide. The supports and side panels were cast as one unit with the cart. Carvings of cherubim, lions, and palm trees decorated the panels and supports wherever there was room, and there were wreaths all around. All 10 water carts were the same size and were made alike, for each was cast from the same mold. Huram also made 10 bronze basins, 1 for each cart. Each basin was 6 feet across and could hold 20 gallons of water. He arranged 5 water carts on the south side of the temple and 5 on the north side. The sea was placed at the southeast corner of the temple. He also made the necessary pots, shovels, and basins. So at last Huram completed everything King Solomon had assigned him to make for the temple of the Lord: 2 pillars, 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, 2 networks of chains that decorated the capitals, 400 pomegranates that hung from the chains on the capitals, 2 rows of pomegranates for each of the chain networks that were hung around the capitals on top of the pillars, the 10 water carts holding the 10 basins, the sea and the 12 oxen under it, the pots, the shovels, and the basins. All these utensils for the temple of the Lord that Huram made for Solomon were made of burnished bronze. The king had them cast in clay molds in the Jordan Valley between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon did not weigh all the utensils because there were so many. The weight of the bronze could not be measured. So Solomon made all the furnishings of the temple of the Lord. the gold altar, the gold table for the bread of the presence, the gold lampstands, 5 on the south and 5 on the north, in front of the most holy place, the flower decorations, lamps and tongs, all of gold, the cups, lamp snuffers, basins, dishes, and fire pans, all of pure gold. The doors of the entrance to the most holy place and the main room of the temple with their fronts overlaid with gold. So King Solomon finished all his work on the temple of the Lord. Then Solomon brought all the gifts his father David had dedicated, the silver, the gold, and the other utensils, and he stored them in the treasures of the Lord's temple. Chapter 8. Solomon then summoned the leaders of all the tribes and families of Israel to assemble in Jerusalem. They were to bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from its location in the city of David, also known as Zion, to its new place in the temple. They all assembled before the king at the annual festival of shelters in early autumn. When all the leaders of Israel arrived, the priests picked up the ark. Then the priests and Levites took the ark of the Lord along with the tabernacle and all its sacred utensils and carried them up to the temple. King Solomon and the entire community of Israel sacrificed sheep and oxen before the ark in such numbers that no one could keep count. Then the priests carried the ark of the Lord's covenant into the inner sanctuary of the temple, the most holy place, and placed it beneath the wings of the cherubim. The cherubim spread their wings over the ark, forming a canopy over the ark and its carrying poles. These poles were so long that their ends could be seen from the front entrance of the temple's main room, the holy place, but not from outside it. They are still there to this day. Nothing was in the ark except the 2 stone tablets that Moses had placed there at Mount Sinai, where the Lord made a covenant with the people of Israel as they were leaving the land of Egypt. As the priests came out of the inner sanctuary, a cloud filled the temple of the Lord. The priests could not continue their work because the glorious presence of the Lord filled the temple. Then Solomon prayed,
O Lord, you have said that you would live in thick darkness, but I have built a glorious temple for you, where you can live forever.
Then the king turned around to the entire community of Israel standing before him and gave this blessing.
Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who has kept the promise he made to my father David. For he told my father, from the day I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, I have never chosen a city among the tribes of Israel